So we're here today with Mevis Aiyeju, founder of ME Solutions. Thank you so much for making the time to meet with us.
You're welcome.
So what exactly is ME Solutions?
So funny enough, we have a very long name. It's very grand and big. It's called Magnanimous Earthbound Solutions. Don't ask me what it means. It's a long story, how we came about with that. But what we basically do is we do agricultural technology, meaning we focus on solutions and agriculture and combining agriculture with technology to find solutions in the sector. Because every region and countries, they have different issues in the sector. So right now we're looking at some of the challenges that we have in Africa.
What are the challenges that you have discovered are mainly in Africa that you're trying to solve?
So one of the issues is when you have urbanization, what happens a lot is that the agriculture actually takes place very far away, and what that does is, first off, you have a large CO2 footprint, right? Your logistics going into the farms and out, it's a lot. Two, logistics itself are expensive, meaning that the produce that arrives is actually very, very pricey at the end of the day, and this happens everywhere. And Nigeria is a perfect example. We mainly farm in the north, and even if you look at the map and it's like, oh well, it's an 8-hour journey, yeah, but with the terrible road network that we have, it's actually like a 24-hour journey. It takes a day, 2 days for some of these vegetables to arrive, and these are perishable items, right? And they're not being transported in cooling trucks and things like that. So there's a lot of issues around logistics and self-sustainability of some of the states that we're in the south, and towns and all that. So that's one of it. You have the environmental, well, not environmental factor, but the global warming factor, meaning that this desertification from from the Sahara downwards, you're having a lot more dry land, less rain, less fertile soil. So we have to prepare ourselves that this is something that is going to continue. So we have to look at new ways to farm even within those environments and those areas, which is why we went into soilless farming, right? So there's that independence from weather, seasons. Did it rain? It didn't rain. That's on one end. But on the other end, we are really maximizing our water usage, which is really, really important. In fact, I think it needs to be one of our major priorities, because I think in the next 50 years, wars will not be fought because of oil, it will be because of water, right? So what we do with our technology is we use 95% less water and fertilizer, right? So I can use 2,000 liters of water on one farm for 6-7 weeks if I want to, and that same amount in the soil is used in a day. I mean, it's not going to last you longer than 2 days or so. So that's kind of to give you the comparison, right? So we're really efficiently using water. We keep reusing the water, so that's really good. We're maximizing it. And secondly, we just end up using it a lot longer. So these are some of the challenges we're addressing. I mean, there's a lot more.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
There is energy efficiency. We use a lot less power when it comes to soilless farming systems, because I think in the Western world, if you see a hydroponic or aeroponic system, they require 24 hours light. So when I set up the company, or when I started my research, I actually re-engineered the system. It took me like half a year, and I changed it into a system that only runs on 1 hour of electricity in 24 hours, right? Which is very, very small. So, so we're now looking at energy saving, water saving, and we're looking at reusing nutrients and all that. So you're really covering environmental factors that are crucial to preserving our natural resources as a whole. Because, the truth is that I think I read somewhere that our groundwater resources, which is the water that we can actually drink, will be depleted in the next 50 years if we continue. And that's very scary. I think people look at the oceans, they're like, so much water, it's salt water, you can't drink that water. The water that you can actually drink is in the ground, and I think 80% of it is being consumed through agriculture. So we're using a lot of water and not using it efficiently. So these are some of the things that we address with our technology.
Okay, so just to break it down, Mavis, what exactly is you've talked about soilless farming, right? So what exactly is the technology involved there?
So there are different types of soilless farming,
Okay.
right? I will break it down into aeroponics, hydroponics, and aquaponics, right? Now, aeroponics from air means air, right? So meaning the roots are hanging in the air. and we supply the roots with moisture at a specific schedule. So this can be through misters or whatever it is, right? And hydroponics usually means they're submersed completely inside water, right? So they're inside a container and there's just water constantly there. And then aquaponics is now doing either of that in combination with fish.
Okay.
Right, so you're using the waste of fish because that's nutrients and fertilizer, and then there's like an ecosystem between the fish and the plants, right? Something I want to get into, but we're not into that right now because it's very complex. Because you're not just dealing with plants, you're dealing with fish. Hydroponics can be a bit challenging in hot tropical climate because if you have stagnant water, it's going to get hot.
Yeah.
And the moment water gets hot, it doesn't transfer oxygen anymore. And the moment roots don't get enough oxygen, that's it, right? They start to die immediately. So we opted for aeroponics because we noticed that there was a really good response because the regular spraying of nutrients actually allowed there to be a new oxidation process like every few minutes, basically. But nobody was really doing it. So aeroponics is not something that a lot of people actually know of. NASA actually, I guess, designed it first about 30 years ago, because they were trying to figure out how to grow vegetables in space, right? And they can't just use tons and tons of water, so they needed something that's just enough what the plants need. Because I think I had to do some research and I realized, you know what, how much water do plants actually absorb? We water them so much, but what do they actually take, right? And my research showed that, to give an example, 500 tomato plants, for example, actually only absorb 5 liters of water in 24 hours. It's like a couple of bottles of water.
For sure.
But you're spraying them with like 1,000 or 2,000 liters of water. So that's not efficient. I mean, if they were absorbing 2,000 liters, fine, but they're not, right? So with aeroponics, I'm giving them just what they need, and whatever they don't, that drops, I actually keep reusing it over and over again.
So does this happen in like a controlled space, much like a greenhouse?
Yes,
or?
exactly.
Okay.
So, but what we do is, so I don't really believe in greenhouses in tropical climate. So there's two different things. There's greenhouse and screen houses. Greenhouses are fully closed, meaning you're creating your own climate with air conditioning, heaters, and things like that, right? Which is being used in the Western world and cold climates a lot because they have heaters. And in a screen house, basically, it's surrounded with net. So you're controlling insects and things like that, but you have natural ventilation.
Okay.
So what we have is we use screen houses, and then we cover, and then we have a roof that keeps out like rain and dirt and things like that from coming in. So we utilize screen houses, and we do everything with natural climate, natural ventilation that is already available. And then in terms of, I know the next thing you're always like, how does it still look? I don't understand. So basically, you need to think that plants don't, or the roots don't absorb soil, right? Let's be very clear. They don't absorb soil. What they absorb from the soil is water, nutrients, and oxygen, right? So all I need to create is a space where the roots can hang, right? So, you can use a pipe, drill a hole in it, like a big, 8-inch pipe, drill a hole in it, and the root hangs in there, and then you can supply them. So there's different ways you can do that. Different crop have different sizes. I could even do it for a tree, to be honest with you. I would just require a very big structure, but you could pretty much do it with anything.
So do you have the screen houses for yourself, or do you install them for other people?
So like I had told you before, is we figured that it would be smarter to be a service provider.
Yeah.
So at least to start off with, right? So what we're doing is we're allowing people to utilize our technology, meaning we're a service provider. So we can install our technology for you, we can help you manage it, and we can also help you distribute your produce. So that way, as a startup, we didn't have to raise funding to set up our own farms. I felt like setting up our own farms was kind of on the nose, like it was too simple. I figured I can still always do that at some point, but if I want to do that, I need a lot of funding, right? So I was like, well, I mean, if I install the system, the client owns it, they own the property, I charge a service fee, and I'm good, right? And I can keep it moving, and so that's kind of the business model that we have. But in the future, we're definitely also going to have our own farms. For sure. What we do have, though, is a research and development facility.
Okay.
So we have a place where I do all my experiments.
Okay, so what funding did you need? Like, what are the initial costs? I can imagine the screen houses, for example, right?
So so the different stages we went through. I think at the very first stage, I created like my mini system, which was probably like 2 meters by 1 meter. It really wasn't anything big. To first test my theories, right, and things
like a prototype.
Exactly, because re-engineering it, not running on power, required some additional engineering, and I had it all in my head, and then I needed to put it out there and test it, right. So that was nothing more than probably $1,000 or something, which we raised internally. The second larger facility and more scalable, which is now our R&D facility, we got some funding for it, and which we then turned into equity. So the person now owns equity in the business, and the facility is now our R&D facility.
Does someone look for you if they want to have like a farm, or do you look for them, and how do you set it up?
I mean, I think it's as startups, I think it's really important to approach with caution. I think that's a mistake a lot of startups make. They go online and just post everything out there, and I think it's really important to take baby steps, simply because you're probably still developing and still testing stuff. So getting clients was not our problem. I think there was enough word of mouth between our existing clients, and so that wasn't really my problem at all. Actually, I had to keep on telling them, oh, I'm still doing R&D, I'm not ready to install right now. So it was really word of mouth, and it's a combination of clients. So we have some who have never gone into farming, high net worth individuals who are in oil and gas. They want to diversify. They really believe that agriculture is the future. So those are some of our clients. And then some of the other clients that we have are existing commercial farmers who have invested a lot of money in agriculture, understand that it's quite risky. Sometimes you have to pump your money in and be patient before you start getting a return on investment, who are open to experimenting, open to trying new things. So those are some of the clients that we have now. But our future is definitely also going to be smallholder farmers in combination with financial institutions, whereby they provide financing for us to install our technology for farmers, simply because we are de-risking a lot of the risks involved in conventional farming. So for the banks, they're like, okay, so your yield predictability is a lot higher, right, with what we do. 2, our yield is much higher in a smaller space. So I have harvested on 200 square meters, and this is real stuff, right? On 200 square meters with tomatoes, what someone else was doing on a hectare, which I think is 10,000 square meters. So I was doing about half of what he was doing, which is crazy because he's on 10, not even 10, it's 20, 30 times the space I'm in. So we're, because we're doing vertical, right? So we go upward. So that way it allows us to yield a lot more in a smaller space. We have no seasonal dependency, right? So these are very, very serious elements that banks and financial institutions find very attractive, because in soil farming, the risk is wide and high. They can't really predict yield. External insects, whatever, can just come and wipe it out, and you can't really maximize the space you're farming. So definitely the future for us is going to be a combination of a lot of things. I mean, I'd want to install a system for schools, in urban settings, in an estate, where the estate facility can have their own farmers market, and they can harvest the tomatoes as they're driving into their homes, so there's going to be a variety of places we want to work in, but baby steps.
I can imagine that there's a lot of technicalities to the whole project, and I know you've mentioned that you have an R&D facility, but even before that, were you in the agricultural space, or how did you get in?
So how I got into it, I don't know. Honestly, I cannot explain this to you. I have no idea, and I don't even have any technical background in agriculture or anything. And I think, to be honest, I don't even think it's a limiting factor. I think if you have interest and passion, and we're in the age of Google and YouTube, you can, and research. I mean, there's so much research online, millions and millions of pages of content of research. So I had no previous experience in it. I used to be in brand management and marketing. I was far, far away from that sector. And it's just a series of coincidences that really kind of got me into this, It wasn't something that was planned. What triggered it was actually the oil crisis of 2015, late 2015. which really affected Nigeria very, very badly. And I was really trying to understand, like, what's our problem? Like, what are we doing wrong, And obviously the biggest factor was, okay, one, oil was our major export, and that's what our entire currency was running on. But then two, we're not self-sustainable. We're still importing food, we're still importing this and that. And I realized I was, at the time, I was doing work for multinational companies, right? And I appreciated the experience that I had, but I also felt like I'm part of the problem, I'm promoting foreign products to my people, and I'm telling them to buy it. And a lot of these multinationals didn't have factories here where they're really creating employment, where I can say, yes, this product is attached, there's like 10,000 jobs that's attached to this product. I couldn't say that. So I decided I didn't want to do it anymore. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I had no financial security. I had nothing. I had no backup plan. I was just like, I'm not doing this anymore. I can't complain about the state of my country, but to do this, but say this is really rubbish. So yeah, so I just stopped. And probably a month or two later, I met a scientist who was experimenting with soilless farming, and I got hooked. And the whole thing just took off from there, basically.
Wow. What did your transition look like? Because you quit cold turkey, right?
Yeah.
and then you met a scientist, and then, like, how?
Yeah. So, yeah, it transitioned. And, it was probably something over a couple of months. I mean, I met a scientist, and we kind of started something together, but it didn't really work out. Sometimes it just doesn't work out, and eventually I went off on my own. The transition, I think I probably spent 80% of my time on my laptop and Google. It was not a joke. I was really like trying to understand this, just, get a feel. And then, I was a tomboy when I grew up, and, I was interested in engines, and I was very like, oh, this is really cool stuff, and I like the way engine works and all that. So that probably helped, I think at the end of the day, I was really trying to find a solution. I thought the concept of soilless farming was so cool, and it makes so much sense. What was bugging me was the electrical requirement, especially in a place like Nigeria. I mean, not all African countries have the issues we're having, but a lot of African countries have, inconsistent power supply.
Yeah.
So I was like, I can't say I have this awesome, solution, but it requires 24 hours light. It's not going to sell, So I really invested a lot of time and with little to no resources. And when I mean resources, not even technical resources. Like, nobody understood what the hell I was talking about. Like, they were really like, okay, I was trying to figure out, how can I generate pressure, how can I do that? And I really had to, it really took a while, and I actually went a bit crazy for some time. I really think I looked like Einstein, like, I was showering, I was just like writing stuff down, I was up all night. It was a really, really weird time, figuring it out in my head, and then now putting it together physically, right? You're definitely talking about like a year of stuff, right? No income, nothing. I moved back home for that period because I had no income and all that, right? And it's always good when you have a good support system, when you have your family, your mom, dad, and all that supporting you. Yeah, it was cold turkey. There was no transition. When I was getting calls, and that was crazy, right? I was getting calls, oh, come and do this event, come and, and I was like, I'm not doing it. And it's like, and I'm talking major brands. You must yourself feel like you're crazy. You have no money. There are people calling you for jobs, and you're not doing it. You're just, in your crazy lab. So it's not for everyone. I think if you don't have a lot of, like responsibilities like children and things, like it helps, right? Because I can just be like, well, I'm just gonna. In Nigeria, we call it soap gari. It basically means,
gari.
Yeah, so you're gonna just eat water with gari and sugar, and that's it, right? It's a very unhealthy diet, but it's very cheap, So you kind of just rough it out, no social life, no nothing. But I think at the end of the day, it was worth it. I mean, that was like 3 years ago now.
What was everyone around you saying or thinking?
So I think everybody was very excited. People that knew, I was very quiet about it. So it's not like people actually knew. People actually thought I left the country.
Okay.
So when they saw me, they're like, "Oh, you're back." I'm like, I never left. I never left. but like full circle, my family, my brother, they were very excited. They were like, "This is really cool." But at the same time, I could see how they were like, "Okay, we'll see what's gonna happen." But they were very supportive. I think the people close around me, I think we all agree that agriculture is an absolute must, and it must be the future. We must be able to feed ourselves in different climates, different regions, different circumstances. There's too much famine in the world, and I think that's very inspiring. It's not just famine. Even in Nigeria, we have an issue of malnutrition, right? And a lot of your micronutrients and all come from vegetables. In the north, we have this starch-based diet, and it's very unhealthy. Starch-based. That's why they have these big bellies. People don't really understand. They're like, oh, they're starving, but they have big belly. Yeah, it's just a swollen belly of starch. There's no nutrients. There's nothing. So, for me, I think the inspiration and the motivation was enough to like push me through for so long, even when I had no idea where this was really gonna go.
So we've met quite a few people by now. I think about 51, and our running theme has always been how difficult it can be. How some people have talked about depression and anxiety. And I can imagine in your situation as well, getting no money, all these calls coming to you saying to you, hey, come get a job and so on. And you still we're like, no, I'm really focused on this and this is what I'm going to be doing right now. So what was going on in your spirit, in your head, in your heart around that time? And how did you manage it?
That's very interesting. I think it's really important that we actually talk about these things because otherwise people can actually tend to feel very alone, kind of if they feel like they're crazy, basically. I think you go through different phases, right? And different experiences and different like internal growth, right? And I really genuinely think that if you keep reminding yourself of what got you there in the first place and why you started the journey in the first place, I think you would always somehow find a way to continue. I think if the motivation is not personal, it's material, then you're gonna clock out that journey very, very quickly because money, it's not the truest, the most genuine motivation. Yeah. So I think if you have, so for me it was a social motivation, right? And feeling like I want to be able to feed people, like people who really need to be fed and things like that. And not just the feeding of people, but also generating jobs, right? Generating jobs for the youth, right? So these are things I felt passionate about. And to be really honest, and I know it's really weird, but I remember in the very first few days when I found out about this technology, right? I must have gone through like a phase of euphoria, right? And there was a part of me, honestly, that felt this was my calling. Like, honestly, whatever religion, like I literally felt like God was saying, Mavis, you are my tool and I'm going to use you to do this. Honestly, that's what it felt like. And I know it's very weird, but it's very true. It was like, this is what I need to, I absolutely must, this is my life's purpose. And I think that helps you, right? I'm in a much stronger place emotionally, right? Because you were at the talk and you could hear me tell other entrepreneurs, right? You have to also be aware that you can only do what you can do, right? You can and it's very hard for me, especially for me, because I'm very, very hard on myself. I've always been, right? I've always had extremely high expectations of myself. So this journey was like a teachable journey because you're doing everything. And sometimes, you know what I compared it to? I always felt like I was walking up a downward going escalator. The escalator's going down. You're like, but you're literally not even moving. Like you're staying at the same place, but you are exhausted, right? And that can be really discouraging, So that's when I think I started realizing what success felt like, right? I was like, you know what? There's not going to be an end on the journey, right? The journey is happening. That's it. That's going to continue happening. So I have to start pinning down screenshots, like moments that really matter to me, right? Moments where I felt like I'm on the right path, or a stranger's like, oh my God, what you're doing is, I think this really needs to happen, or oh my God, we can do, right? So these are the moments that you really time, you're like, okay, this is why I'm doing it. And then you need to be very conscious and aware that this is a moment that it's going to fuel me to the next milestone, because you're always going to run out of steam at some point. So you need to always find these things that make you feel like you're doing something that matters, you're doing something that makes you happy, moments of happiness and all that. And letting go. You know, like I said, you can only do what you can do. I mean, if you're lazy, that's a different thing. But I think if you work hard and your motivation is right, honestly, sometimes I've noticed, and throughout my other careers, right, I've noticed that every time your motivation is material and money, it never really works out. But when your motivation wasn't, like money was not even on your radar, things progress and develop exactly the way they need to because your own motivation is right. So sometimes there was times when I had to check myself and my business partner, right? Because it's not even, oh, I wanted money because I wanted to go on a vacation. No, money, oh my God, I had bills, I had this and that to pay. And I was on a flight. I don't know, I was on a flight somewhere and it just dawned on me and I was like, you know what, the energy that we put out there, you know, you're going to get that stuff back. So I landed and it was like towards December, things were winding down and I remember rent was up and stuff like that. And I told my business partner, I was like, you know what, we need to stop obsessing about these bills and this money. These bills and the money that we need, it's there, like it's not going to change whether we obsess about it or not. But I feel like we're sending like the wrong vibes to the universe. Like we need to really reel it back in, be more positive and talk about the stuff that inspires us and things like that. And I think it really changed kind of the trajectory of how we were growing. And I think you still keep on coming to these points, right? You will. But now it's like, I'm not moved. I need to come up with like $10,000 tomorrow, but it's fine. It's good. We'll be fine, you know. And truly and generally, a lot of times things work out, but differently. You know, different from the way you thought it would work out. And I think that's really important, you know. I really learned that there's not just one solution, right? So you think, I need money to do this, right? And you're so set on it. But I think when you let go, you see how things just evolve and they fall into place, you know. I read somewhere where someone was saying that, you know, the universe always has your back. Like, you know, the universe is doing its thing. It's like working it out. And he's like, don't worry, I got you. But you need to have some faith and kind of let go. So, you know, that's how I kind of dealt with it. I had a lot of depression. And late last year, so that's December 2018, or November, I experienced my first burnout. And that was really scary because I didn't even know that was what was happening, right? I just, you know, because I'm like, I'm the German machine. Like, that's what they called me. Like, in the previous, I was known as the, I'm just going. And there was a time when my body was literally giving in, right? And what was scary about it is that the hospitals ran all tests under the stars and everything was negative. Biologically, I was completely fine. There was nothing wrong with me, right? But I was running fevers every night and like high fevers, right? I was running fevers and I was extremely weak, like physically weak. Like there was a day when I was coming back from the lab and I could barely walk up my stairs. And I really mean that. Like I could barely lift my legs to like walk up the stairs, you know? And one of my board directors, he now pointed out and he said, Mevis, what you're experiencing is burnout. You really need to take a step back. Because the truth is, if you collapse at this point, you know, the company is on pause, right? Because you're still developing structure so that, you know, I can be pulled out of the company and things should continue moving, right? But in the early days, you know, you are the entire business, so you have to be functioning well, right? So he was like, you really need to reel back because I also didn't know how to deal with boundaries. So I'm responding to emails at 1 a.m. on a Sunday, you know, I'm just going, all the emails there. And so I really had, so recovering first it took me forever. It probably took me like a month, really and truly. And I think it was the first time I sent an out of office report. I didn't even know how to do it. I had to Google how to send out of office. I was like, how does this work? I saw it in settings all the time, but I never did it, right? So I had to set that for a couple of days. And honestly, the one day that I really like shut down, like phone silent, this and that night I didn't have a fever. And then the next day, I went back to normal work and I had a fever again. Like literally my body's like, this is not working, like you need to shut down. So I had to really try and, you know, like if it won't make any difference if I respond, you know, now or tomorrow, just respond tomorrow. Like, you know, I'm a bit obsessive, so it was very difficult for me to kind of wheel that back in and prioritize on myself, right? And really understand that yes, you want to be the German machine, but the truth is you're human, right? And unfortunately, your brain is working so much, you really need to give it a break. So that was a very scary but very eye-opening experience. And I think I took it more serious from the health perspective, but I had also started taking my emotional health a lot more serious, right? Because they're very interconnected. So it was a time I was very stressed. I had a lot of pressure, mental pressure, and it eventually affected me physically, right? So I really learned that if I'm feeling stressed out, take some downtime, right? If you're feeling anxiety, do something. So I do random stuff, like I go to the cinema on a Monday morning. I do really weird things, but I think, every entrepreneur needs to kind of find their thing. I start my day really and truly, like officially, where people can like emails and I'm responding, not until like 11, which is weird, right? But everybody's different, right? And I always find it funny when I see all these posts where they're like, oh, Bill Gates is this, and Mark Zuckerberg like at 5 and you run 6 months, and I'm like, you know what? It works for them, good for them, right? But I think first off, you're an entrepreneur, you're a business owner, so you have the luxury of actually setting your schedule. And as long as you're efficient, right? Efficiency to me is the most important thing. So I like to take these. I like to sleep in the morning. I don't play with like my 8 hours. Like it's a must. I have to sleep my 8 hours because I know people who boast, oh, they sleep 3 hours. I'm like, that's not something to be proud of. Like you cannot say, oh, no, it's not a good thing. That's a bad thing. So I'm like, look, if you sleep 3 hours, you cannot tell me that throughout the day you're operating at 100%. You're not. It's absolutely impossible, right? So I wake up, 8 a.m. or whatever, and I work out, and then I have my breakfast, and while I'm having my breakfast, I'm still like me, reading something, I don't know, watching something, whatever it is. And then when I start, I'm like a machine. I'm going like, and I'm like, boom, 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 boom. My to-do list done, this, that, right? Meetings, this, that. And then I'm very efficient. And yes, and then I work maybe a bit later, but because I start my day later, I'm okay with that, so I can end up still sending emails by like 8, 9. But then at some point I'm like, nope, now it's like downtime again, Another thing I also started was having a hobby, which is very weird because I really realized, no, I need to do something that literally has nothing to do with work. I used to paint when I was much younger, right? And I was very good at it and I really enjoyed it. So by the burnout time and December came and all that, like I literally gifted myself, like I got the easels, the paint, like got the whole kit, and I started painting. And I remember the first day I started painting, it was the weirdest experience because all I was started thinking is that there's no end to this. Like there's no reason I'm doing this. Like I'm just doing this. It was such a weird experience. And then since then, I've painted probably over a dozen paintings that people have taken, and then a lot of people are like, oh, they're willing to pay and and I had to really say no, right? Because this is how it starts, and then it's a business again, and then I'm gonna paint with the mind that, oh, I'm gonna put it in a gallery and this and that. So I made sure that I was like, nope, like I set the boundary, right? I set the boundary that this is a hobby. People want my paintings, I'm happy to give them my paintings. Right now I don't want this to be work, because that's exactly what would happen. So boundaries is really important. Creating emotional space for you. And I have a supportive board, which is great. To be honest with you guys, I've even had one of like our advisors literally ask me if I have a boyfriend, right? And I get where he was coming from, right? He's like, you need to have that other life that is not connected to your work, because otherwise, you need to have relationships and emotional relationships and all that. So boundaries is an absolute must. Seeing the signs when you're starting to like go down that burnout route, like acknowledge it and be like, nope. Because there's no point. If you're really like in the hospital, what are you gonna do? Then you're not gonna work for like 2 weeks, right? So I'd rather take like 2-3 days off where I'm able to say no, I can't do meetings right now, rather than just going 24/7 every day. So these are some of the lessons that I learned, and I try to tell other people as well. Like we're human beings, right? And we need to remember that.
Knowing what you know now, what would be your advice to young people?
Not everybody needs to be an entrepreneur. That's like advice number one. I think we need to kind of calm down with the whole everybody. I completely disagree. It's not for everybody. Not everybody's meant for it. And you know what? There are amazing people doing amazing things in corporate worlds. We need to appreciate that there's CSR happening. There's all sorts of technical developments happening in multinational billion companies, right? So I think one, you don't need to be an entrepreneur just because you're young, you know, just because you're a millennial. You don't need to be an entrepreneur. I think that's number one. And even if you have like that inclination and you have those great ideas, it doesn't mean you need to become an entrepreneur immediately doing that. It could just be something you're doing on the side and watching it grow and develop, and then maybe you can see business potential in it. That's my first advice. Then to entrepreneurs themselves, there's no one size fit all to the journey. They should not allow other people's journey determine how theirs should be. I think that's very, very tough, because we read about all this amazing stuff happening nowadays, and it can be intimidating. You feel like you're failing, you know, you're like, oh my god, these guys are raising all so much money, what have I done? You know what, everybody has their own timeline, you know, there's stuff you're still learning, there's lessons to be learned, there's experiences to be had, you know, just because someone had it in 2 years, good for them, you know, it may take you 7 years or 8 years. So I think as long as you're focusing as the journey being the goal, rather than some place in our mind that's when I get there and I have my first minute, that know that you're already on it, like this is happening, like be here, be mindful, right, like be present, you know, enjoy some of these moments and be very present. Know that this is the journey, that's what this is about. It's about exactly what you're feeling now. You're sitting in a little room with your 5 friends, no money, you're eating bread and egg and you're coding. That's it. That's the good stuff. Like, you know, enjoy it and go with it. Don't think that there's a very specific way this journey is supposed to go. Everybody has a different one, and I think be aware of what everybody else is doing. But I think it's very important to not compare yourself to other people, because that's where you kind of get discouraged, right? Because you have to be your number one fan.
Thank you so much for sharing. I loved it.
welcome.
I feel like we could talk for
I
years.
know, we
Like,
could
let's
go
change
on.
numbers.
Oh, I have your number.
Thank you. Thank you so much.